weight of responsibility early on. And I think of that all the time with my kids. When my kids are the age they are now, I was married, having children, and living in a foreign country. So I'd already lived a whole lifetime by the time most people are graduating college.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I've always tried to remain optimistic. I think that's a big piece of my personality. But I would say that innocence I probably lost around 12 or 13. Just, I think, because my parents weren't having a great time. The relationship with them was pretty tumultuous, and I was really kind of trying to navigate some of these bigger decisions by
Yeah.
myself
Well,
through high
sure.
school and
Yeah.
college. Yeah. We lived in El Paso, Texas. They didn't have much career counseling. I knew that I didn't want to stay in El Paso, Texas, and I think the choices were to become an airline stewardess or marry someone in the military. So I met my husband, and we were pretty instantaneously just connected. We never had a discussion about what our relationship was or how much we cared for each other. We kind of just always knew that we were going to be together. And when we started dating, my dad would put his paper down as he came in, and he'd be like, his unit's moving to Colorado. And I'd be like, he hasn't said anything about it. And he said, yeah, I think he's probably moving. So I asked him about it one day. I said, are you moving to Colorado? And he said, yeah, and would you go with me? So I said, absolutely, I'd love to. And we started on our adventure as a married couple living up here in Colorado.
So it kind of sounded like it really wasn't a choice that you made. It was just two lives kind of meshing together as they were meant to be.
Yes,
Is that an accurate description of
it's
it?
very accurate. I think we were always meant to be together. I think our paths would have kept crossing until we came across each other. It was very easy with him. You know, we were pretty carefree, but we didn't have a very long courtship. Our first date was on Halloween, and we were married on January 3rd. So
Oh, wow.
a couple months.
Well, some people believe in long ones, some people believe
Yeah,
in short ones, when you
yeah,
know it's the right person. I
yeah.
suppose, it doesn't make sense. Let's move along just a little bit. You had a couple of children, right?
Yes, we
Can
did.
can you talk about them a little bit?
Yeah, so I think we moved up to Colorado, got pregnant, both switched our jobs, were away from our family all in the first year of marriage. So that was a little stressful, and we both were not, we didn't have great examples of married life. And what that looks like in a healthy situation. I think we, got into some tumultuous times ourselves, and we were using the tools that we had observed our parents use that were not great
Sure.
tools,
Yeah.
and so we had one little girl. Her name was Danielle, and she was born in 1996. And then we had Grace in 2001, so about a 5 or 6 year difference between the two of them. And we got orders to go to Germany shortly after Grace was born. And that was really, for us, a great time. We kind of got away from maybe family pressures. We just were able to create whatever we wanted to create. I think that was
Yeah.
the first time our relationship, we had an identity as a couple,
I see. So
and
it
we
was
weren't.
kind of a new beginning for you, if you will.
It was. It was definitely a new beginning. And we were committed. We were both committed to staying married, and we went to counseling, several different counselors a couple times a week. And we really did put in the work to have a good marriage.
Did you
So
find the counselors to be helpful at all?
I did, because he was so open about going and being transparent and getting the help. And I think that is what made it successful. I mean, if you're going to counseling and one person doesn't want to be there, they don't want to do any of the things, it's going
Sure.
to be, he was committed to us having a better marriage. And so
Okay.
he went happily. And we had some mentors in our church and things that were our, also counseling us. And I feel like during that time, it was that like leap of faith, like every step you put down, there was a stone under there to catch our feet.
Yeah.
And we just had a time period of that where we were really strong in the church. We had a great relationship with each other. And I'm so grateful that we put all that hard work in.
Looking through that from this perspective on the back end, um, do you, and I know you probably can't speak for him, I don't know, maybe you can, but for yourself, did were the kids a significant motivation in staying married, or was it just the marriage?
I think it was just the marriage. Honestly, we would always joke about as soon as, we didn't have that other baby for 5 or 6 years, we're like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
this is it. We're going to put her in college and we're going to go to Hawaii and surf all day. I mean, for us, it was always really, the kids were a bonus and we enjoyed having our kids, but our relationship was like our priority to each other.
Okay. Now he was in the service,
Yes.
and and uh, he there's a lot of dots behind that,
Yeah.
but let's go a little bit slower here. Okay,
Okay.
he was deployed. Where was he deployed to, and what
Um,
time frame was that?
Okay, so he started being heavily deployed around the time that Grace was born. So I think the first deployment that he did overseas was to Bosnia while, let's see, I want to say I had Grace and I think he was deployed prior to that. So his first one was, maybe 4 or 5 years into the marriage where he went overseas. And he went to Bosnia. He loved that deployment. We did a lot of projects with the schools there. He was really rebuilding schools. This was after the Bosnian War. We thought about adopting a Bosnian child. He
Hmm.
said it was one of the most beautiful places he ever had been. It really changed his perspective on being in the military to like that humanitarian side. I think he really, really enjoyed that. And he told me that was his favorite deployment that he ever went on, and he wasn't doing his job per se. He was a tank commander. So, and later on became a sniper. So that trip of him doing this kind of, hanging out with kids, getting to know these people that lived in this town that he was stationed in, that was his most enjoyable time in the military.
Okay.
Then he was stationed in Kosovo. Um, After that, while we were still in Colorado, when we got to Germany, I think he in process for about 2 weeks, and then he was stationed in Kosovo again. And then he was stationed in Iraq, and he came home from that deployment and then was stationed in Iraq the last time. And that one was 18 months, but they kept stop lossing and keeping them over there longer. So
Okay.
that deployment ended up being about 2 years for everybody.
Back up just a little bit to Bosnia. It sounded to me the way you were describing it was, and maybe you can explain why he wanted to join the military, why he wanted to be a serviceman, and did that kind of evolve and change into just from being just a job to being in the service. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I think he played Army a lot when he was a kid, and he
Okay.
wanted to be in the Army. He always wanted. His mom told me he always wanted to be in the Army. He joined shortly after he went to got done graduating high school. He joined to drive these big tanks, and I think one of our third or fourth dates, he took me down to show me the tank, and it was impressive. I was like, "This is amazing! You drive this around and shoot it," and and he enjoyed being a teacher. Honestly, I think that's what he came to love about it. I would get on him every once in a while about getting promoted, because our friends were getting promoted and everybody, and he was certainly smart enough and capable enough. And he told me one time a few years before he passed away, he said, I won't get to be with my guys. They need me. They need me to train them. And if I get promoted, I'll be sitting in an office doing paperwork, and I won't be the one to train them, and they need me to train them to come back. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, then I'm done having that discussion, So I think for him, he was very rule driven, rule based. And that's something kind of that his other soldiers tease about a lot is that he was very, he followed the directions to the letter of the law, annoyingly sometimes, I think. And so, but it gave him this just great reputation of being an integritous soldier.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
didn't do things the shortcut way. He didn't, accept people's bad behavior. He didn't accept them not doing their best, and he really did. He had a great group of guys under him, and the camaraderie uh, that he experienced. I think that is why he joined and continued to stay in the
Okay.
military.
All right.
I didn't come around to military life, our first duty station up here in Colorado. We were in Colorado for about 7 years, and I worked off post. I didn't really need that support. Um, so I just didn't participate a lot of times. I didn't go to the meetings. I didn't need that as a support, so I didn't utilize it. When we got to Germany, it's a lot more isolated there unless you speak German. So I tended to lean on that group a little bit harder, and I got really involved volunteering. I volunteered full time for several different organizations on post. I was pretty active in our church. We ran a group called Protestant Women of the Chapel, so I, ran Bible studies. I ran Christian book clubs. I was very active, and that was the time probably where I personally had more girlfriends than I had ever had before in my life, because I tended to have close relationships with guys because I was kind of a tomboy, and that's where I was a little bit more comfortable. But I got around this really strong group of amazing women that we just supported each other as much as we could do. You need me to watch your kid. You need me to run the store for you. We were dealing with these really heavy issues, but not dealing with them, because you're living your everyday life. You're going to the grocery store. You're having a conference with your kid's teacher. You're doing all that, and you're alone doing it. And that's not the part that's difficult. The part that's difficult is that your loved one is away and in danger
Hmm.
during all these mundane tasks that you're doing every day.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to be a support to each other, that every day's heavy. So what can I do to lift it for you and make
Okay.
it a little bit less heavy?
Well, we want to go just a little bit farther here because your story is not just your story. I think you're carrying the legacy of Michael's story as well. So, if we can we go to that moment um, where you first found out that your husband was killed in action?
Absolutely. He actually, because that we'd gone through counseling and we prioritized our relationship so much, he wrote me every day. I got a letter in the mail every day. He called me every day. And this is a huge deal. You have to go and stand in this big line
Yeah.
and wait for your turn. And, sometimes it's going to be late, all these kinds of things. But he would call me every day. And we kind of had made a date to talk on the phone. I think it was Saturday night. uh, I was planning to go camping the next day. I was going to take the girls down to Garmisch, which is a military resort. We were going to watch the fireworks and go camping. And I think it was Friday evening. He called me and he said, we're supposed to have our phone date. And I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot. Me and the girls are watching Little House on the Prairie. We just started watching Little House on the Prairie, and they were super into it. And I said, I'll just talk to you tomorrow. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. And the next day, I didn't hear from him. I'd sent him a care package. He did mention I'd sent him a care package with tuna and bread and all this so he could make tuna fish sandwiches. And he was like, I'm really not feeling good after eating all these tuna fish. So I didn't hear from him the next day, which was abnormal. But I was just like, maybe he just wasn't feeling well enough to like get to the phone or, whatever. And I was talking with one of my girlfriends on the phone and we had a meeting. Let me take you back just a little bit. They have a meeting before they deploy that lets you know how they notify you of different situations. So if they're injured and they're able, they will call you personally and say, I was injured and this is what happened. If they were injured and they're unable to make that phone call, then you'll get a call from their first line supervisor. If they're, um, they said if we come to your house but we're not in greens, that means that they've been injured severely. But if we're in greens, that means they passed away. And so I was living in a house in Germany that's a multi-family. This is how most Germans live, and grandma and grandpa live downstairs. And I was talking with my girlfriend. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and someone rang the buzzer. And I said, "Hey, someone rang my buzzer. I'm going to let you go." And she's like, "No, it's really abnormal for someone to be ringing your buzzer at 9 o'clock at night. I think I'm just going to stay on the phone with you." And I said, "Okay." And I buzzed to let whoever in. And I opened up my front door and I saw the black shoe coming around the corner. And I just said, "They're here." And I hung up the phone and she knew what that was. And she came, immediately. And they also go to a very great extent to not have someone notify you that in the community. And I think this is very wise psychologically. I was friends
Sure.
with all the chaplains. I
Yes.
played bridge with their wives every Friday.
Yes.
So they had a chaplain to come from another community to be the one to notify us. And I appreciate that because I would see him after that and I was like, no,
Yeah.
I didn't do
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
other
Sure.
than be the bearer of some bad news.
Yep.
And so I think that was, I had all these weird thoughts about how to tell the kids and like, what do we do now? I really wanted to just go camping and pretend that it wasn't real. But
Yeah.
of course, as soon as I found out, as soon as they notified me, they notified a lot of other people in the community and people were calling and wanting to come over and these kinds of things. And I decided just to let the girls sleep and I asked everybody to leave. And then when they woke up in the morning, I told them, that he had passed away. And so that started our journey in living without him.
And how I, I'm going to ask the question because I know a lot
Yeah,
of people that may be listening or watching to this are just going to ask the question.
yeah.
How did they receive it?
Oh, you know, hindsight's 2020, but I think we had put a really good foundation into these kids. They were pretty stable to begin with.
Good.
And I have done a lot of work with them over the years about, there are going to be times where we're getting bad news, bad information, and it's how you respond to it that, is going to make you or break you. And this, I really went on a journey after that to kind of try to keep things as normal as possible. So normally in Germany, this notification happens, the family gets on a plane, and you never see them again. I knew it was going to take a bit to get his body back from, you know,
Yeah.
um, Iraq and go to, I decided that we should probably bury him in Colorado. That's where his parents were living at that
Sure.
time. Um, you know, I didn't know where we were going to be or what we were going to be doing, and that just seemed like the right choice to make. So, but I did know it was going to take some time. So I wasn't trying to rush out of there.
Yeah.
I still had business to take care of. I kind of just went on normally. And that, I don't know that it registered. It's like how much shock you're in.
Sure. Yeah.
And things weren't really different other than I wasn't getting that phone call and I wasn't getting that letter
Yeah.
every day, you know? So I really tried to, and I thought, I don't feel like it was fair to just like uproot them, the girls, and have them lose everything at once. I wanted them to be able to live in their house for a little while, to be able to continue going to their school. And so we really tried to stay in Germany as long as we could till they kicked us out.
Okay.
We
Well,
did return home for the funeral. And actually, I was working with the German government. I was trying to stay there, and basically they were like, you don't have a sponsor. And the unit said they would sponsor me. There was some questions about, could we collect off the German system? Could we support ourselves? But then we have to pay taxes to Germany. So there was a lot of these issues kind of going on, and they were set to return from the deployment in November, late November. And I went ahead and made a decision to take the girls to the States for late November through December, because I just thought it might be too much for them to watch their friends' parents returning, and that's not going to happen for them.
yes.
So it was kind of the German government's decision, because we left for that period of time, that we should probably not be there much longer. So
Okay.
had 90 days after we returned from that trip to move.
So you came back to the States, and can we kind of
It was
talk?
in July 1st, 2007, that he passed away.
Okay. Yeah. And when you got back, let's talk about the funeral a little bit. Uh, he was well received in the community as a hero, as well he should be.
Yeah,
Um, the funeral, I came to understand, there was a poem that was read. Can you talk
yeah.
about that? And I'm sure there was a lot of tears that were shed during that moment.
Yes, yeah, I was just so proud of both my girls and how they handled everything. My oldest daughter had written a poem about him, and she got up and read it during the funeral, which I thought was incredibly brave. And she did it, and it was a heartbreaking poem,
And, and
This
how
is a
old was
little,
she at that time?
she was 11, and Grace was 6 or 7. I think Grace had just had her 7th birthday.
Okay.
And the insanity, see, we were not handling things under the direction of a professional. We had a birthday party for Grace after the funeral at my in-laws' home. And like looking back on that, I'm like, that was an insane thing to do. But like at the time, we were like, oh, well, everyone's here, and might as well have this birthday party. I don't think, it was tumultuous with his parents initially after losing him. It, and it didn't get better through planning the funeral and having the funeral. Um, it was just a very tough time, and we've all talked about it since then. We didn't know what to do because it was our first time dealing with this, but
Sure.
we all could have done better. We agree on that.
Well, I mean, isn't that the story of everybody's life? Hindsight is 2020. We have the luxury of looking back and saying we should have, could have,
But
would have, but we didn't. And let's
I
move
think I
forward.
have a tendency to be like, well, everyone does it this way, and that seems horrible. So let me just try this other thing. And I don't know if it's any less horrible, it's just a different horrible sometimes.
Well, it's
But
all.
I
Uh,
had a hard time emoting during the funeral.
did you?
I really, it's weird. You're having these family members you haven't seen for, 10 years while you've been overseas, and this is the first time you're seeing them. And I think I really had difficulty um, showing how I was feeling about the funeral. I think we should have those 6 months after someone dies about.
Yeah. I, I don't think there's any normal that we
Yeah.
can attribute things to regarding that. You know, everybody's deals with tragedy differently, and um, you know, when a crisis situation comes, let's, if we can, just talk about your faith for a minute. Um, when a crisis situation arises in people's lives, typically there's one of two ways they go. They move away from God, or they draw closer to Him. How important was your faith? Did it get stronger? Did it stay neutral, or did you move away?
I honestly am grateful that I was where I was at when it happened. I was very strong in my faith, very active in my church when it happened. And I think that saved me and my life and my ability to go forward. I think, you go through all the stages. I think at a point, we ended up settling in Florida after he passed away, and we would go to church there. It became very painful to go to church. I felt very angry, that we were doing all the things that we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And there's some really awful husbands in the military. They could have taken him. No, just why they take my lovely husband,
I know.
all these kinds of things. And it's like, if it's a father relationship, you know, fathers do difficult things for the betterment of their children sometimes. And I could understand that logic. I
Hmm.
just knew what it felt like to sit in church.
Yeah.
I think for a period of time it was a very it got to be where I started avoiding it,
Yeah.
because it was so painful.
That's understandable, and I don't see where any person objectively could stand in a place of judgment over that. Um,
Right.
if we can kind of close the chapter on that part of your life,
Yeah.
I know that his legacy lives on, but is there anything that the general public should know that we don't know about military widows?
Um, well, something that's been a little bit of shock is the compensation and how that works. You do get a policy initially with the military when someone passes away. We were paying into, or he was paying into, two different programs to, if he passed away, that we would be getting this income. And what the Army did was they decided that you don't get both, even though we paid into both. And so the compensation monthly it's pretty low because it's not near what it would be if he had retired or um, you know I guess to me it's just it's not something you could live on. You can't live on that compensation alone. And they did just make a ruling to go ahead and give us the other part of our insurance that we paid for, but they're phasing that in. They're not paying the back pay. So we get a third this year, a third next year, and then finally in 3 years from now, they will be paying out this compensation that we paid into that we haven't gotten for 10 years. So,
Wow.
you know, they kind of admitted that that was a problem, but also not really rectifying it. So I would like to see there be more, and it was such a unique situation at the time that it was happening. I don't know, and it could also be because we were overseas, but there was really not a lot of support for us from the military after he passed away.
I see.
It would have been nice to have somebody that was experienced with these types of situations to kind of guide you and let you know what to look for. And I guess they say it's available. I could have went and got a counselor.
Mm.
I think peer counseling is probably the best situation. I would like to see them set up a situation where widows that have been through it can sort of mentor these other widows that are just starting their journey of that, to know what to expect. Because I just don't think a counselor would have been effective during that time because not in the capacity of the uniqueness of the situation. And I think that's true with veterans also. I work with a lot of homeless veterans, and the the research shows the way that they reach success more often is through that peer counseling, because what they've been through is so unique, and you really
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
do what you're supposed to do to heal or to be functional when you're just getting advice from somebody that's never spent a night away from their wife, let alone years at a time.
Sure.
So like,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's that would they could do some more work there.
So let's fast forward then. About 10 years ago, you moved to Colorado Springs. You have another son now,
Yes, I do.
and let's hear about him a little bit.
Well, he is a very precocious, interesting little kid. He has taught me a lot. One about, boys. I've had two girls, and girls, they care a little bit about what their mother thinks of them. But boys, they don't care as much about that. And just, it's been, he's just a very cool kid. He's had his struggles in school. He's been diagnosed with some special needs. This year, we moved to a great school district. He's in regular school for the first time since kindergarten. So just like he's overcome a tremendous amount. And that's something I think, like, I have two kids with special needs, and the fact that they keep trying to fit in, to do what everyone else is doing when it's so difficult for them and it doesn't come naturally to them. I just like love that spirit about them.
It's so inspiring, and it's like right when you need it, it's a breath of fresh air every time you think about it. It's
Because
amazing.
they're going through a lot every day just to make it through every day,
Yeah.
and they continue to try and do more and do better. I'm very I'm a very proud mommy
Well, good.
for three of the kids.
And I think you should be because, when we were kids, there were less social pressures, even though there were a tremendous amount that we went through. But there were less than there are today.
Yeah.
Kids nowadays just have an amazing amount of social media pressure, let's put it that way.
Yes.
Whatever media it is that they're exposed to, they just have so much pressure. So it is amazing that those with special needs are able to even make it through every day with a smile on their face. So it's
Yeah.
inspiring. It really
Yeah.
is. You recently went to real estate school,
I did.
and you're a licensed
It's
realtor.
limiting our plans a little bit. Yes. Yeah.
Can you expound on some of the decision making
Absolutely.
process as far
I'm
as that goes?
a lifelong student. I feel like I'm a skill gatherer. I'm so interested in so many things, and this is probably my undiagnosed adult ADHD, but I really love learning. And I returned to college about 10 years ago when we moved back to Colorado. I've been going on and off during that time in pursuit of a psychology degree. I'm very close to finishing that up. I'm not interested in being a counselor, but I have loved going back and learning at this point in my life. Like, it's so much more enjoyable to, I'm getting a lot more out of college than, when I tried it back when I was 18 or 19. So I've been doing that. I went to school to be an esthetician a couple of years ago,
Okay.
and I started doing that work. And then the pandemic happened, and the spas that work just dried up. And so I kind of, sat around for a little bit, and I have a friend, and we're kind of hold each other accountable for different things. And he said, I'm going to buy a house in the fall. You already advised me on a lot of these things. Why don't you go ahead and get your license so that I can compensate you, make sure you're compensated. And the pandemic, you got the time, might as well. And so I decided to go to real estate school. And it's been an interesting journey. I'm getting ready to switch realty companies, and it's pretty quick. I just started in October with one, and I'm moving to another. I thought I would love it a lot more. than I do. I've done some like investment work before. I love houses, but it's a lot. It's a lot of that socializing piece. I think that that you're talking about. You have to really be available a lot of the time, and I think I value my privacy. I value my time with my family. And I'm going to see if I can come up with a system that makes those a little bit more balanced.
Okay. Uh,
And so I also drove for Uber Eats during the pandemic also. That was
okay.
another one of my jobs trying to get through the year. And that was a great job. There's tons of flexibility. I was able to take my son with me. He seemed like he really learned the value of the dollar while we were doing that together to kind of see, this is how much work it takes to pay this bill or do that. So that was a really great, unique experience. So I think a lot of people had a tough 2020. Ours wasn't too bad.
You had mentioned something about really valuing your time with your family. Now, I can see that you're, like you mentioned before, you're a tomboy. You're not afraid to wear a ball cap and carry a gun.
Mhm.
Um, what do you do for recreation? I'm sure there's a lot of parks and things out there in Colorado, but what do you guys do
I
for
love to
recreation?
go hiking. I love to go hiking. I love going on camping trips. I'm a big into kayaking. I love going kayaking. Um, I enjoy just being outside a lot of times. I think is great. Here we do have so many. I've been actively exploring Colorado for 20 years and I haven't seen all of it. There is an immense amount of things to see and do here, and so I do try to get out as much as I can. I'm a nerd, like a rock nerd. I'm a geology nerd.
Are you?
So I love to go collect rocks. And my family's all tired of it. And they're like, can we please go home now? And I'm like, oh no, we never know what kind of rock might be over.
You never know.
You never do know.
It's
Yeah.
it's funny though that that word recreation because it's a part of recreating yourself. You personally, I want to just pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is to recreate yourself on a regular basis?
I mentioned this to a friend yesterday that called me for some advice. And I said, it is literally the most important thing you can do is take time for yourself. It makes you better at everything. It makes you, if you take a break and recharge, however you do that, if that's reading a book or whatever it is that you're doing that fills you up, that makes you um, at peace and calm and happy, the more you do that, the more effective you're going to be in every area of your life. You're going to be a better parent when you get back from that weekend alone. You're going to be more focused on work. You're going to have different ideas, and I think for me, the 2020 lesson was the time alone, like and how much growing I did mentally this year was because of the amount of time that I've had alone to reflect and think and, rebuild and redesign what I'm going to do going forward.
It's amazing what introspective can do to a person. Um, it's like standing in front of the mirror and actually seeing yourself, um, kind of the way other people see you. But there's certain things that you can see about yourself that people don't know, and
Right.
it's kind of eye opening. And introspective is very helpful to me, at least.
And the design in the United States is really to not have any time for that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Fortunately, we got some. We just got some this year, and I hope people hold on to that and value it. And and
Yeah.
you have grandkids too, and I hope you advise your kids to take time for themselves and make sure that they're filling their own bucket before they play with those precious babies.
Well, yeah, and I think that having that introspective and spending time with yourself and recreating yourself only helps to contribute to community. because, like you said, you can't be the best you to others unless you do that, on a regular basis. And that's good advice for anyone that might be hearing this or seeing this. And it sounds to me like you said someone called you for advice the other day. Um, that you've been giving advice. Are you a mentor? Do you have people that you
I,
speak to?
honestly, when I got that call yesterday, I was like, this is something maybe that I need to explore more is the coaching. I don't want to do psychology in the, traditional sense where I have a practice or those kinds of things. But if I can, give somebody a lift up to get them to the next level, and I just have that perspective that maybe they're not able to see while they're in it, um,
Sure.
that I think is a very valuable piece. So yeah, I think I would be interested in doing some work there.
Okay. Your story matters. What do you want people who might be hearing this or seeing this to take away from your story?
I think that I would want everyone that hears this story to love themselves a little bit more and the people around them a little bit more. I think every time I've acted in love, I've never regretted it. So those other times, a little regrettable. So, just being there for each other. And that's like, doesn't mean your family, doesn't mean your friend. Like, you're out in the store and you can do something to help somebody in that moment. Like, go out of your way and do it. I mean, I think uh, you're never going to regret helping others and doing for others as long as it's balanced with doing for yourself and helping yourself. That way you've got that to pour into somebody else.
So many intertwining stories in this world that we live in, and every single one of them matters, including yours. And I appreciate your time and sharing it with us. Hopefully, it'll be an inspiring uh, story for at least one person that might hear
Hopefully, hopefully.
it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And
And I think this is a wonderful concept, really good. I can't wait to get to know all my fellow humans out there.
well, we're in our infancy right now, and hopefully, it'll be the first of thousands. So
One
we'll see what we can do.